All right, let's dive into ancient Greece today. We're tackling Euripides the Bacchae.
Ooh, the Bacchae, a classic.
It really is, and it's been sparking debates for centuries.
Definitely, definitely.
We're going to try to unpack why this tragedy is so powerful and, why it still resonates with us today. We've got some excerpts from scholarly analysis and passages from the play itself, so we're going deep.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
What I find so fascinating about the Bacchae is how it tackles those, core struggles of being human,
Yeah.
that push and pull between order and chaos,
Yeah.
reason and instinct.
It's like Euripides just understood something fundamental about us.
Absolutely. And he tells this incredibly dramatic story to do it. Gods, kings, revenge, and a whole lot of wine.
Oh yeah, lots of wine.
So for our listener, let's set the stage a bit. The Bacchae takes place in the city of Thebes.
Ah.
Even in ancient Greece, it had a reputation.
Oh, absolutely. For drama, for tragedy, it's like this magnet for myth and those really intense stories.
It really is.
Even its founding is just steeped in legend.
Oh, tell me about it.
You've got Cadmus following this interesting prophecy, let's call it. It involves a cow.
A cow.
A cow. And he ends up founding the city.
Man.
And then you look at his family tree, and it's like a who's who of Greek mythology. Io, Epiphus, Europa, they're all connected to Thebes' history.
A cow prophecy. Sounds like Thebes was destined for some wild times from the start. And speaking of wild times, you can't talk about Thebes without mentioning, well, the Oedipus curse.
The curse that just keeps on giving?
Yeah.
Oedipus, he, without knowing, fulfills this prophecy. He ends up marrying his own mother, and then, boom, all this misfortune just rains down on his family.
It's a heavy legacy.
Yeah, and that curse, it just hangs over Thebes and the Bacchae. It's like a shadow.
A shadow. Like the city's stuck in this cycle of tragedy. And then Dionysus shows up.
Oh, yeah.
He's not just any god.
No.
He's the god of wine, ecstasy, and, things get a little unpredictable when he's around.
Mm-hmm. To say the least. Dionysus is like a force of nature, this god of liberation, transformation, but also disruption and chaos.
You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly. He's born from the thigh of Zeus.
What?
Yeah, after his mother Semele dies, and he comes back to Thebes to basically claim his rightful place as a god. And, well, to punish those who denied his divinity.
So he's back in town with a score to settle. What I always found so interesting is how Euripides portrays Dionysus, that mix of charm and danger.
Oh, it's brilliant. You never quite know what he's going to do next. And that unpredictability, that's the heart of the tension in the play.
Absolutely.
And then you have Pentheus, king of Thebes.
King of order.
Yeah, he represents everything that Dionysus opposes. Reason, order, control.
Mm-hmm.
Pentheus sees all that ecstatic, unrestrained worship of Dionysus as a threat, like it's going to undermine his authority.
Undermine the stability of Thebes.
Right.
So you have this clash of titans brewing.
Oh, like epic.
The god of chaos versus the king of order.
And it's not going to end well for Pentheus.
You don't want to be on a god's bad side, especially one who's known for, well, let's just say things get messy.
Messy is an understatement. But it's fascinating, right, how Dionysus doesn't just overpower Pentheus with brute force. He's much more subtle, much more cunning.
He's a master manipulator.
Absolutely. He plays with Pentheus's mind, slowly pushes him towards madness. Euripides is showing us how fragile our reason can be, how easily we can just fall into those primal instincts, even when we think we're in control.
And this is where the Bacchae gets really intense, really tragic.
Yeah. We get that messenger's account of Pentheus's death, and gruesome doesn't even begin to cover it.
It's horrific and captivating at the same time. It's like you want to look away, but you can't.
It's a raw depiction of what happens when passion runs wild, and the consequences of denying the divine. You see Pentheus, disguised as a woman, lured into the woods by Dionysus, and torn apart limb from limb by the back, led by his own mother.
Agave.
Oh, Agave. It's brutal. It's shocking. This reminder of the primal forces that are always there, just under the surface of civilization.
Wow. Okay, so we've set the scene, the characters, this clash of wills that's like the engine of the play's tragedy. But the Bacchae is so much more than just a story, right?
Right. It's layered, it's symbolic, it's full of meaning that we still grapple with today.
Okay, so join us as we go deeper into the heart of the Bacchae. We'll be exploring those enduring themes and what this masterpiece has to say to us in our modern world.
Welcome back. Now that we've kind of laid the groundwork, let's dig into some of the symbolism in the Bacchae. Euripides wasn't just telling a wild story, he was using symbols to get at these, profound truths about human nature.
Okay, I'm ready to decode this ancient Greek puzzle. What kind of symbols should we be paying attention to?
Well, let's start with wine. It's not just a drink in this play. It represents the intoxicating influence of Dionysus. That liberation from social constraints, the blurring between human and the divine.
So when they're having those crazy Dionysian parties, it's not just a party, it's like they're tapping into something primal.
Exactly. Wine is like a path to a different state of consciousness, a way to connect with the raw energy of Dionysus. And then there's the chorus, those chanting, dancing folks who are always observing the drama. They're not just there for entertainment, they're like embodying that duality of Dionysus himself.
You mean how they can be both celebratory and kind of terrifying? Like they reflect those two sides of the god they worship.
Exactly. They're a constant reminder that Dionysus is both creation and destruction, joy and madness. And then there's all that animal imagery, the snakes, the bulls, even Pentheus's death. You know how it's described, like he's torn apart like an animal?
I'm seeing a pattern here. It's like Euripides is saying, even with all our civilization, that animalistic nature, that potential for chaos, it's always there, just below the surface.
Yes, and that's the tragedy of Pentheus. He's so rigid, so focused on reason and order that he denies that part of himself, that connection to those primal forces. He tries to suppress it, to control those natural impulses, and it's what destroys him.
So if Pentheus represents suppressing our instincts and Dionysus is all about unleashing them, where does that leave us? What's the takeaway for the audience, both back then and today?
That's the brilliance of the Bacchae. It doesn't give easy answers. It's a play that throws these fundamental questions at us about who we are, the forces that shape our lives, both the internal and external.
So are you saying there's a little bit of Dionysus and a little bit of Pentheus in all of this?
That's a really good question. Maybe the key, like we were saying earlier, is balance, a way to embrace the full range of human experience without going to extremes. Recognizing those primal urges, the desire for ecstasy, for liberation, but without falling into that destructive frenzy that destroys Pentheus.
Okay, but how do we find that balance?
Yeah.
How do we navigate between the pull of Dionysian ecstasy and a world that's all about order and control?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think that's where the Bacchae really speaks to our modern world. We're constantly pulled in so many directions. Pressure to conform, the desire for instant gratification, so much information and stimulation all the time. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, to lose sight of that balance.
So maybe the Bacchae isn't just a warning about repressing our true nature, but also about what happens when we lose ourselves in pleasure, in escape.
Exactly. It's about finding that middle ground where we can connect with our passions, be creative, but without forgetting our responsibilities to others and the community. It's about recognizing the power of, the divine, whether you take that literally or metaphorically, and finding a way to integrate it into our lives, a way that's meaningful and sustainable.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. I'm starting to see how the Bacchae isn't just some old Greek play. It's speaking to our struggles, our anxieties, our search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming.
That's what makes it a masterpiece. It goes beyond its time and place. Gives us these insights into the human condition that are just as relevant today.
Okay, so we've covered the symbolism, the themes, the connection to our own lives. But there's this big question that hangs over the Bacchae, right? The question of divine justice.
Ah, yes. Are the gods just, or are they just playing with us? Because, let's be honest, Dionysus's revenge is brutal. It's not just Pentheus who suffers. A lot of innocent people get caught up in it.
So is it really justice? Is it divine retribution? Or something more complex? Some of the challenges our ideas about the divine.
That's the core of it, isn't it? And Euripides doesn't give us a straight answer. He gives us this brutal climax and makes us grapple with the implications. Are the gods indifferent to human suffering, or is there a deeper order we're just not seeing?
It's like he's saying, here's this tragedy, now you figure it out.
Exactly. It's not about easy moral lessons. It's about these huge questions about the nature of the divine, how much we can understand, and what our choices really mean.
This is getting pretty deep. I think I might need another glass of wine after this. In moderation, of course.
Of course. But before you open that bottle, let's explore this idea of divine justice a little further. Because it's not just about whether Dionysus is right or wrong. It's about how we, as humans, make sense of suffering. How do our beliefs hold up when things happen that we can't predict or control?
Okay, so for our listener, get ready. In the final part of our Bacchae deep dive, we're tackling the big questions head on. Divine justice, fate versus free will, and how this masterpiece has shaped Western thought and culture. You won't want to miss it. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our bocce deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We've talked about the story, the symbols, we even connected it to our own lives. But there's this big question, right? It's kind of looming over everything.
The question of divine justice, it's a tough one.
Is Dionysus's revenge, is it a righteous punishment? Because those people did deny his divinity?
Right?
Or is it just this terrifying show of force, a god who's just, flexing?
It's a question that's kept people debating for centuries. Philosophers, theorgoers, everyone.
Because it's not pretty, right? A lot of innocent people suffer. Is that really justice?
It's hard to say. Euripides doesn't give us a clear answer.
He doesn't. He gives us this, brutal climax, and then we're left to figure out what it all means.
Yeah, exactly. Are the gods just indifferent to our suffering? Or is there some kind of deeper moral order that we just don't get?
It's like he's saying, here's this tragedy, now you figure it out.
I think that's a great way to put it. He doesn't give us easy answers. He gives us profound questions about the divine, about the limits of what we can understand, about what our choices really mean.
So what are we supposed to take away from all of this? If there's no easy answer about divine justice, how do we make sense of it all? The chaos, the suffering, I mean.
I think maybe the most important message isn't about finding that answer, but about asking the questions. It's about looking at our own beliefs, about the world, about good and evil, about fate and free will.
So it's not just accepting, it's questioning.
Exactly. The Bacchae reminds us that the universe doesn't always play by our rules. Things happen that we don't expect, that don't seem fair. And sometimes there's no good explanation.
That's a tough pill to swallow. But in a way, it's also kind of freeing. We don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful insight. The Bacchae doesn't try to comfort us, it confronts us with how complex and messy life can be.
And maybe that's the point.
Maybe. It makes us embrace the mystery, except that we don't know everything. And it encourages us to find meaning even in the face of suffering, to keep searching.
Even though it's a tragedy, it's not completely hopeless.
No, it's not. There's room for growth, for change, for understanding. We can learn from our mistakes. We can choose compassion. We can find moments of grace and beauty even in the darkest times.
That's something we can all hold on to, especially in a world that sometimes feels as crazy and unpredictable as the world of the Bacchae.
It's a message that's resonated for centuries across different cultures. It shows us the power of great art, how it can challenge us, inspire us, and help us make sense of our own lives.
I think that's a great place to leave it. So to our listener, what spoke to you most in the Bacchae? What questions are still swirling around in your mind? Because this conversation isn't over. The Bacchae is a play you can come back to again and again and find new layers of meaning each time. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.